Hey Nature Detectives, I'm Conrad. I'm an outdoor educator with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation at Letchworth State Park, and today I have a nature mystery for you. I found a tree out here in the woods that I think looks kind of like a cherry tree. I think we can use some nature tools to figure out what kind of tree this really is and how it helps us every single day. We'll use two nature tools to do that, our eyes and our fingers. Now, the first thing that jumped right out at me about this tree and made me think cherry right away is its bark. It has a kind of a stripy looking bark that a lot of cherry trees have too. And those stripes are really important for the tree, and they're not very common in the bark of many other kinds of common trees. And that's a really important nature clue. The second nature clue, looking at these leaves, you notice the veins in the leaves? Do you notice how those veins don't just go straight out to the side of the leaf? They come out from the side of the main vein and then curve towards the tip of the leaf. That's kind of unusual. Not all kinds of leaves do that. There are a couple different kinds of trees that do that, and this is one of them. And the third nature clue, while we're in there with those leaves, if we feel around on these branches, I have a couple big spines over here. They're kind of like twigs growing out, but these twigs don't have leaves growing on them. These are spines, and if I poke them with my finger, those are thorns. It's not completely covered in thorns like a rose bush. It's not completely covered in thorns or anything. It's not completely covered in thorns or anything, not like a rose bush, but it definitely has some big honking thorns, especially on the ends of twigs, and I don't really want to poke that much harder than with that with my thumb. Pretty sharp. So let's put all those nature clues together. We have a few thorns, especially on the ends of branches. We have leaf veins that start in the middle and curve towards the tip of the leaf. And we have those really cool marks and stripes on the bark of the tree. This must be buckthorn. Now, buckthorn is not what most plant scientists would refer to as a tree. This is an exceptionally large specimen. These are usually about my height off the ground, some of them a little bit taller. They're what most plant scientists would call a shrub. Now, this one just happens to be pretty old and has grown pretty big. Now, buckthorn can be very tricky because it has those stripes on its bark. Those stripes are called lenticels. Lenticels help buckthorn and cherries, which also have lenticels, and birches, which also have lenticels, helps those kinds of trees to breathe. It helps them to exchange gases right through their bark. Now, even this buckthorn shrub, which is a really big one, isn't quite as big as an adult cherry tree. The shrubs are always going to be a little bit smaller than the trees. But what if there's a cherry tree that's just on its way? It's just growing up. Sometimes it can be kind of confusing with those lenticels on the bark of a cherry tree. Sometimes they look just like a buckthorn. Well, now knowing what you know, you can tell that if it has thorns and if the leaf veins curve and go towards the tip of the leaf instead of just going straight out to the side, it's gotta be buckthorn. Gotta be buckthorn. And unlike a cherry, the fruits that buckthorns make are not very good for us to eat, especially in the past. Very crafty people had some cool uses for them. They'd use them as dyes and inks and even in soaps and things. But of course now there are industrial products that have replaced all those uses. And unless you find a really, really crafty, cottagey person, nobody's going to want to grind up little buckthorn berries to make soap. The berries aren't really very nutritious for different kinds of birds, and there aren't a lot of insects that like to eat buckthorn. That's because buckthorn originates from Asia. In North America, it's an invasive species. Now, it's not a catastrophically dangerous invasive species. It's not a very serious, environmentally harmful invasive species. Buckthorn is pretty much just a naturalized species that's gonna be here in North America for a very, very long time. And if you really want to have an adventure, you could probably find some buckthorn in your neighborhood. If you look around, look for kind of shiny barked trees with those lenticels, those stripes. They almost look like scars. I was thinking the word scars. Those lenticels on the bark. And later in the summer, you'll start to see little berries. They almost look like tiny little plums. But I wouldn't recommend eating them because they're not very good, not very tasty, and they're not very good for us either. If you really want to have an adventure, come try to find some buckthorn in Letchworth State Park. Even though it is an invasive species, it does exist in some pockets in Letchworth. You might have to get into some more obscure trails to find it. I can't think of anywhere off the top of my head that has buckthorn right up against the edge of the gorge, but hey, you might prove me wrong. If you do find some, come in and tell us about it at the Humphrey Nature Center. It's in between Inspiration Point and the Letchworth Visitor Center. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's Nature Mystery. If you have any questions about buckthorn or other invasive shrubs in New York State, please put a comment in the comment section below the video. Share this video with your friends to put their nature detective skills to the test. And as always, like Letchworth State Park's Facebook page to stay tuned for more nature mysteries.